You know what they say, love isn't always on time, and neither am I in this case. I'm back. Got back from my trip yesterday at, I think it was around 8, and I experienced the new LA exit feature. So you can't get Ubers like at the arrivals section anymore. You have to go to the separate section. That's by where the park and fly is. And it's actually quite nice. You you call your rideshare thing and you get in line and they just give you the next car that shows up and you give them a code number, and it was actually quite good. Hello everybody, I am back. I was planning on doing some Star Wars tonight. My trip was excellent. I played a lot with the dog, who I got pictures somewhere, but I didn't load them up. I was busy writing up the lesson plan for today, as it were. Yes, Puppy. Puppy's very good. I'll see about that. I don't think that I can add Puppy to the system on the fly because she's on my phone, not my computer. So the trip was good. I went back for Christmas and New Year's, and I got some good Christmas presents. I got a new battery for my laptop, which has been excellent. We saw Star Wars. Star Wars was, well, I enjoyed it while I was watching it. We'll talk more about Star Wars the next time we play Star Wars. It was Star Wars. It was Star Wars all along. I think that's the best thing I could say about Star Wars. Yeah, so I got a new laptop battery. We saw Star Wars. I got a new Penguins hoodie. I got to go to a Penguins game for 80s night, which was a lot of fun, even though they lost. Dan Potash was cosplaying as Macho Man Randy Savage, and that was amazing. And they had arcade games there as well. I'm very good at Galaga, so I played Galaga at the Penguins game, and missed the first part of the second period, but that's fine. Yep, I did find a new battery. It's working out great for me. I spent a lot of time over the break playing the games that I put on my Switch, and I was doing a little video game history, that kind of thing. I played the first 3 Dragon Quest games because I never really played them before, and they're not good. They're certainly not good by today's standards. I don't even know that they were good by the 80s standards. I would say I would take any of the Final Fantasy NES games against any of the first 3 Dragon Quest games. The exception of maybe 3, Final Fantasy 3. I think Dragon Quest 3 might be a little better than Final Fantasy 3, but it's the grindiest game I've ever played in my life. It's kind of absurd. But I've been on a real video game history kick lately, and that's kind of what led me to do this today. So I realized on the plane yesterday that I was going to be jet lagged and exhausted and probably not have the hand-eye coordination necessary to play Star Wars when I got back. So what I started doing was, it's a new decade, right? It's 2020. 2010 through 2019 was pretty good for video games, and I thought that I would do a few retrospectives. So I've got 3 things that I want to present for you today, or tonight, really. And this is a good one to just listen to. You don't need the screen up. I'm just going to be putting words up there, mainly. So this is a kind of a podcast type video. That's the category I put it under on Twitch. So I'm going to go through the 3 top 10 lists that I came up with over the break, really, and especially on the plane ride yesterday. I have what I consider the 10 most influential video games of the last decade. I have my own personal top 10 from 2019, which I never went over. And then I have my favorite games, my top 10 favorite games, rather, of the last decade. And you'll note that there's going to be a very big difference between the most influential games of the decade and the games that I like the most from the decade. It turns out that there are a lot of very influential games that I really hate. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started here. We're going to do a little bit of on-fly editing. Alright, this is the most influential games of decade. I'm gonna have to move that around just a little bit. Let's move this over there. There we go. Most influential games of the decade. This is a top 10. It's in no particular order, though. It's very difficult to quantify exactly how impactful a game is. Like the exact impact of it. But if you can see the impact, you see the way that it influences other games that come after it, how it influences people who play them, how it influences the industry as a whole, the way things change, monetization practices, for instance. That's one way that you can measure the impact that games actually have. And does it create a genre? That's a good one. So the games that I picked for this list are all games that have one of these major influences that you can see. And the first one on the list is The Last of Us. So, The Last of Us is the game that I think was really the game that codified like the mainstream AAA game. If you ask me to close my eyes and describe what a big budget AAA video game looks like, I would say that it's a game about a middle-aged white guy who's probably voiced by Troy Baker. It is very likely set in some kind of warped version of the real world, usually America. And in the game, you have to survive something, and you become the father figure to a child or a teenager or something like that, who is also the secret plot device or MacGuffin that everybody else, all the bad guys in the game, are after, and you kill a whole lot of people to protect and or rescue that person. I feel like I've just described, I don't know how many games over the last decade I've described. The first one I can think of, the first one of the decade that falls under that kind of description, I think was Red Dead Redemption. But it wasn't until The Last of Us that really became, like, that is what all of the games are about. Now, this was a bit of a tough choice, because Last of Us and Bioshock Infinite released within a couple months of each other in 2014, I believe. And they are kind of the exact same game. Like, the child in question is even basically named the same. You have Ellie in Last of Us and Elizabeth in Bioshock Infinite. Like, both set in a warped version of America. It's like they're kind of just the same game. Oh, and the main character in both is Troy Baker, of course. Joel and Booker DeWitt are both Troy Baker. So you could really put Bioshock Infinite in there as well. And how did we get there in the first place? I would say Last of Us is... if Last of Us was a Pokemon, its base form is Bioshock. Its middle stage evolution is Uncharted, and then its final stage of evolution, depending on whether you use a sunstone or a leaf stone on it, is either Uncharted, is either The Last of Us for the leaf stone, and the sunstone would give you The Last of Us. Yeah, that's right, and both of them are either the daughter or becomes his daughter. That's the whole point, is that these games are made to kind of stimulate the paternal instinct in young to middle-aged men and get them attached to these characters in that way. And I think that they are very successful in doing so. Like, that's a formula that is, like, that's automatic. That's big money. It's even, and it's not even just American games as well. Death Stranding is also this game, except in this case, the child is a baby in a test tube, and there are multiple dads, and one of them is Norman Reedus, and the other one's Mads Mikkelsen. Mads, at least, is a step up from Troy Baker. Norman Reedus is not. But they're all just the same game when you look at them. Over and over and over again. And there's just so much money in making these games, and they're almost always guaranteed hits, that we're going to keep seeing them forever. God of War. The new God of War in 2018 is this as well, except this time the sad dad is Christopher Judge, who's an excellent actor. He's very, very good. I liked him a lot in Stargate SG-1. And Christopher Judge he's great. And he's a nice change of pace from Troy Baker, let me tell you. Alright, so the next game I have on my list as being very impactful is Gone Home. Now, full disclosure here, I don't like Gone Home very much. However, it is incredibly impactful overall in terms of, kind of the revolution in indie games in general. There's been a real proliferation of them over the last decade, especially the last 5 or 6 years as well. And one of the major trends in indie games in general was using them as more, narrative experiences than traditional games. And that started with Gone Home. There's not really, there's not a whole lot of gameplay in, the ways that you normally think of gameplay. Puzzles, challenges, that sort of thing in Gone Home. It's more, an internal thing where you need to piece together the story yourself based on the clues that you find. Now, games like that were kind of derisively referred to as walking simulators, but not to drag Death Stranding again twice within two games on my list. We have real, actual walking simulators now, so maybe we can get a better name for this type of genre of game. Now, this game came out all the way back in 2013. And the whole thing at the time was, is this a game? There are a lot of people that were saying, well, this isn't a game at all. But I think it's reasonable to question whether a game with no real recognizable gameplay is a game. However, I do think the answer was already, there was a clear answer all the way back then. And the answer is yes. Because we also have, the entire genre of visual novels. And basically everybody agrees that visual novel is a genre, whether or not they like it. And those very often have actual zero gameplay. So if visual novels are games, Gone Home is absolutely a game. And that should hopefully put to bed that particular line of thought. Alright, let's see. What is next on the old list here? Oh, here's one. Now, I never personally played this game, but I do recognize the impact that it has had on the industry as a whole, both positive and negative, and that is Destiny, the original Destiny. So back in 2009, before this decade, there was Borderlands. Borderlands was an RPG with guns, and it created, basically, you would get kind of procedurally generated guns, that sort of thing. And it essentially originated the looter shooter or shooter genre, but we didn't really see it as a genre of game until Destiny came around, the looter shooter. Destiny is the game we look at as the archetypical looter shooter. That's, when you think of that genre, that's what I think of. I don't think of Borderlands, I think of Destiny. And I don't think it's wrong to call it World of Warcraft with guns. There are a lot of similarities between, the whole thing as well. Bungie going from Halo to Destiny, just like when Blizzard went from real games to World of Warcraft all the time. But from an industry standpoint, it's even more interesting than that, because I would say that Destiny, if you had to ask me, when did games as a service as a thing start? I would say it started with Destiny. It had both, the paid DLC expansions, which had been a thing at that time already, with Bioshock, Mass Effect, that sort of stuff. But it also had, purchasing premium currency, that sort of thing. Regular, raid updates or strikes, that sort of thing. I would say that Destiny is really where the current era of games as a service began. Because it makes a whole lot of sense. If you spend all that time and effort going to make, this massive world that you want people to get engrossed in and connected in, why wouldn't you want to milk it for everything you've got, especially if it becomes successful? So I understand completely why games as a service is a thing. I just hate it. I'm not a big fan of games as a service. I don't want to spend years and years and years in the same world doing the same things. If you're going to have me do the same things all the time, I at least want to go to different worlds with different characters and that sort of thing. That's just, that's what I like. I like games where I can just, here's a new world, here's a new world, here's a new world, here's new characters, that sort of thing. But a lot of people like, having that one world that they love going back to, whether it's, Azeroth or if it's the solar system in Destiny, and that's totally okay too. All right. The next on the old list, what do we got next? Oh, yeah, here's a good one. Undertale. No single game that I can think of, with the possible exception of basketball. And basketball had, what, 100-year head start on Undertale? There is no other game that has birthed as many memes as this one. Sans Undertale memed so hard that he got into Smash as a costume. It's absurd when you think, Megalovania. Exactly. There are no more, there's no game on record that has more memes than this one. And, they they range from, Megalovania and everything to funny Craigslist ads for Undertale orgies. And, YouTube right there, that is your signal of this is not a video for children. Basketball memes, yeah. There are a lot of basketball memes. Like, first there was Crying Jordan, and then the floodgates opened. But in addition to the whole meme thing, Undertale did a lot of stuff that, we look at and think is kind of crazy. No, I don't think I've seen the doorbell. So you've got a game that combines disparate genres and does it well. In this case, it's JRPGs and shoot-'em-ups or bullet hell games, which incidentally, it is not the first game to have attempted to combine those two things. There is at least one prior called Sigma Star Saga that was not very good. So it had been done before, but it had never been done well. And I think that... later. Okay, I will check that later. I think that Undertale combined those two things very well, and I think the music's very good. And the fact that that essentially one person was able to do this, like, it's proof that you can, with enough time and determination, and maybe a little help from a friend. In this case, it was Temi Cheng, the artistic advisor. You can create something that's going to live on forever. And Undertale, in this case, inspired hundreds, if not thousands, of other people to try their hands at creating games as well. And that's something that we see the effects of to the present day, and we're going to see essentially forever. So I would say that Undertale is absolutely one of the most influential games of the decade, even if I don't think the writing is very good. Moving on. Here's one that we actually played on the stream. Dark Souls. So Demon Souls came out in 2009, and it was at the time, it was just regarded as an import-only, destined to be a cult classic kind of game that would be popular with a hardcore segment of gamers, not going to be a mainstream thing. And for Demon Souls in particular, I would say that assessment was pretty correct, even after it was released outside of Japan, 10 months later. Was it 10 months later or 8 months later? It might have been like a February, October kind of thing. I think that's probably what it was. I looked this up, but I don't remember offhand. But the things that they did in Dark Souls, From Software did in that game, were refined and iterated on. And then in 2011, Dark Souls comes out and it kicks down the door. And it becomes a thing. It's a cultural force that led to, the Souls-like, I'm doing real big air quotes here, you can't through. It created the Souls-like genre, yeah, it kicks you down too, along with the door. Like, you're dead when you get kicked off a cliff, by some random dude in the Undead Burg. But, so it created this whole entire genre. It had multiple sequels. It had multiple, imitators, a lot of which are very good, like Neo. Neo's a fantastic game that I want to stream before the sequel to it comes out. And it also inspired a whole lot of really awful, awfully, terribly, badly written gaming articles and reviews that referred to everything as the Dark Souls of X. When your game becomes such an impact in the minds of gamers that people think about other games in terms of your game, then your game is one of the most influential games of the decade. And Dark Souls is absolutely that. In fact, Dark Souls is the Dark Souls of most influential games of the decade lists. Think about that, why don't you? Alright, moving on. Super Meat Boy. Now, this one was from the very beginning of the decade. This was released in 2010, and this is kind of the prototype of all the high difficulty, constant death, quick respawn platformer games. Like, it legitimized this type of game that previous to Super Meat Boy being out, the only game that you really think of that falls under that category is I Want to Be the Guy. And I Want to Be the Guy is terrible. It's awful. It's something that, it's one of those things like Getting Over It, that you subject yourself to for the entertainments of others. Now, I don't want to be the guy. I'm not going to stream that or anything like that. But Super Meat Boy made this type of game, like, viable. It made you want it. And if not for... the big thing with Super Meat Boy is that it was fair. Like, it would show you all the challenges, and they're just hard. They're just really hard. But everything is laid out for you, and it's all very fair. And, even if you die, you just slam the button, you're right back in it. And you can kind of see where things went wrong as well. One of the most well-loved, critically acclaimed games of 2018 was Celeste. I know a lot of people really like Celeste. Without Super Meat Boy, Celeste never happens. There are lots of games over the last 10 years that just never get made if Super Meat Boy doesn't show that there is an audience for this type of thing. Incidentally, though, the soundtrack in Super Meat Boy, which is very good, was one of the first done by Danny Baranowski. And he would go on to also score The Binding of Isaac and Crypt of the Necrodancer, as well as Cadence of Hyrule, the Zelda Necrodancer crossover. And, I kind of forgot to, I kind of forgot to play the update to Cadence of Hyrule over the break. I regret that immensely. Now, did I have 11 games on my list? I might have 11 games on here. Let me check real fast. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, no, I did have 11. So this particular slot, the Super Meat Boy slot, the other one I was considering for it was Spelunky. However, Spelunky has a bit of a history dispute. So the version of Spelunky that we're all most familiar with was released in the current decade. However, I believe it was originally from 2008. That's right. It was 2008 originally. So that is why it did not make it onto the list. Yeah, the Flash version, 2008. I knew there was a reason I didn't put Spelunky on there, and fortunately it's not because I'm a moron. If I had been allowed to add Spelunky to the list, Spelunky would have been on there because of its incredible contributions to the indie game scene. It basically started the whole trend of run-based procedurally generated games, where you get things like Binding of Isaac, like Nuclear Throne, Neurovoider, Monolith. There's just Enter the Gungeon. There's all sorts of games that we have thanks to Spelunky, but it was from 2008, so we do not have that. Now, on to the next thing that is actually on the list. Can't spell it right, but it is Minecraft. So, there are very few games that kind of establish themselves in the public consciousness. And, by public consciousness, I mean people that don't know anything about games know what that game is. So in the 80s and early 90s, it was Super Mario Brothers. And in the mid-90s, early to mid-90s, it was Mortal Kombat. Because that's when we were getting the whole thing about violence in video games and how it's ruining today's youth, and it led to the ESRB being created and that sort of thing. In the 2000s, it was, for a similar reason to Mortal Kombat, it was Grand Theft Auto. You remember the whole hot coffee mod controversy, all that sort of thing? I remember it very well, and so do a lot of people that know nothing about video games at all. But then we get to the 2010s, 20-teens. What do we even call the last decade? The teens? 20-teens? I don't know. But in this past decade, the game that latched into the public consciousness was Minecraft. It was originally released in 2011, so it was there for basically all of the last decade. And I would say that overall, other than its creator going absolutely off the deep end, Minecraft has been a force for good. Lets people of all ages to play creatively. It's like an infinite sandbox with an infinite Lego set. It's really quite wonderful. And it's gone on to inspire many other games and mechanics within other games, and all of that is likely to never stop. So I would say absolutely 100% Minecraft is among the most influential games of the last decade. And I think that one's inarguable. You can argue with me on a lot of these things, but I don't think you can say anything about Minecraft. Now, this next one, I think you can argue with me about. Pokemon Go. Is it really a video game? Yeah, I'd say it is. Phone games in general, it is very difficult for them to have a real impact. They are largely seen as a time waster or a money sink or some things of that nature. But Pokemon Go, never in my life have I seen more gamers outside at the same time, short of, in the streets outside conventions. It was only, a few months at that time, but Pokemon Go captured the imagination of the world's imagination, made going outside cool again. And, you would see people just walking around, meeting new people, making new friends, generally enjoying life. I played it for those first few months as well. I did all of these things. I had a great time with it. But the novelty of the game did wear off very quickly. But there are still people that I met because I played that game that I talk to this day. And there have been other games that try to capture what made Pokemon Go a big thing. There's like that Harry Potter Wizards Unite game, all that nonsense. But they have failed, and they will continue to fail, because the key element here was the Pokemon themselves. Like, that's the thing that got people outside. It was that kind of the stepping stone to our hearts, the Pokemon. That's what the game used to get in there and get us out. So, for its influence on other mobile games, as well as the actual impact it made in the lives of the players, I would say that Pokemon Go is one of the most influential games of the decade. Which brings us to something that didn't bring any joy or happiness to anybody. PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. PUBG, for short, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. This game was influential in two ways. One is because of kind of the historical butterfly effect that it has had on the industry as a whole. So this is the game that started the Battle Royale boom. That led to Fortnite becoming more popular than Jesus, which then led to Tim Sweeney of Epic Games having more money than God and being able to launch his own competitor to Steam and start cutting big checks for exclusivity to his platform on PC. If I was going to start typing a certain video up. No, that's not a video game. But it's also a reminder to YouTube that this is not a video for children. So there's that. So if Epic could have done this before Fortnite, if just the licensing fees for the Unreal Engine and that sort of thing were enough to let them launch their own platform and start handing out money for exclusives, they would have done it. Like, Tim Sweeney is Tim Sweeney. Like, he's been the same guy. The money didn't change who he was. It just made him more of what he already is. With the Fortnite money, that's how he got to be in the situation where he is right now, where he can just buy exclusives. And the only reason that he got there was because he was able to add Battle Royale to Fortnite. And the only reason he got there is because PUBG popularized the genre and made it blow up. How did it blow up? Twitch. Which means that PUBG also led to Twitch megastars being a thing. You have guys like Ninja and Dr. Disrespect who built careers for themselves, essentially off of playing PUBG. Now you might say, whoa, Yenzer, what about H1Z1? Now that was kind of the the direct predecessor to PUBG. It was an early access for 3 years or something like that. But the real reason, and it was dropped quickly once PUBG became a thing, and part of why PUBG was a thing and why it was a lot more interesting was that it added the airdrop to the start of the game. That wasn't a thing in Battle Royale type games before. It actually, there's a pre-game element of strategy that's really interesting. And Fortnite, of course, memified to where we dropping, boys? Ugh, all that nonsense. But I would say that PUBG was the first time that the Battle Royale thing was really a thing. It launched careers, and it has changed the industry as a whole, for better and for worse. And that leads me to, that's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. One more to go. Zelda Breath of the Wild. So there was, once upon a time, let me tell you a story here. Once upon a time, sequels didn't necessarily play anything like their predecessors. They might not have even been in the same genre. And this story is true. That time was the 80s. You could see it in the Zelda series itself, between Zelda 1 and Zelda 2, both of which I streamed. You can check those out on the archive channel, Virtual Yinzer Max. It changed from a top-down adventure game to, here's a top-down map that gets you to side-scrolling platformer Hellzone. Falcom, in the 80s as well, did a lot of different things with their Dragon Slayer series. There was just a lot of stuff back then, because people were trying to figure out this whole video game industry thing, especially the home video game industry. But since then, it's mainly been more iteration over innovation, and that's fine. I'm totally down with that if the thing you're iterating on is great, and the result of it is also great. But something that you have to do, especially if you're in a killer game market full of amazing games, like, especially this year, for example, I've had trouble keeping up with everything I want to play because there's just so many great games out there. You have to do something to stand out from the crowd. And I don't think that there's been any game in a long-running franchise in the past decade that has really stood out as much as Breath of the Wild did. It threw tons of conventions of the entire series, just put them in the trash. It changed from a very kind of linear, hand-holdy type game to, it was open world, do whatever you want. Here's a puzzle. We're not going to dictate how you solve it. Go nuts. Do whatever you feel like. It's really, really, it had this feeling of freedom that really I had never experienced in a game of that type before, in an adventure game. Like, even in kind of the open world RPGs, that sort of thing, there's really a set number of things you can do, and you can exhaust them very quickly. This is like an Obsidian game on crack. Like, you could just go nuts. You could run straight for the final boss. You could launch yourself into the final boss on a rock. It's just the sheer amount of things that you could do in Zelda Breath of the Wild was enormous, and they only got there because they were able to successfully say, you know what, we need to try something different than what we've been doing for the last 20 years, which is essentially just remaking Ocarina of Time over and over and over again. Now, why do I say that this is influential when nobody else has been able to do this yet? Well, it's a bit of a gamble on my part, saying that it will influence people in this way, but I mean, it was only from 2017. People haven't had a huge amount of time to do things like this. But one example that I would point you to is the Yakuza series. The next game in the Yakuza series, Yakuza Like a Dragon, or Yakuza 7 in this case, they are switching genres completely. They're going from action beat 'em up to essentially, JRPG. And we will see if it works out for them, but that game looks amazing, and if that game also succeeds, I would expect it to inspire even more people to take their long-running franchises and try new things with them. And I hope they do. Sorry, I just need a little drink there. I really hope they do, because, without creativity and innovation and that sort of thing, all we're going to get is more sad dad Troy Baker games, and I'm done with the sad dad Troy Baker games. Death Stranding is the last one that I want to play. So that is my list for you of what I think are the 10 most influential games of the last decade. Open it up for you, chat. You got any ideas? Is there anything you think I missed? Is there anything you think is more influential than some of these? I am all ears, and I will leave you to think about that for just a moment there while I get set up for the next one. What about a Happy Dad Troy Baker game? Well, I think they're making that. Isn't the next Uncharted thing supposed to be about like his wife and daughter having an adventure, and he sits back at home and he's happy that he's not getting shot at for a change? I don't know. I wouldn't play the Happy Dad Troy Baker game. No. If I never play a Troy Baker game again, I'm probably okay with that. All right, so let me just. It's hard to come up with influential games off the top of your head. Yeah, it kind of is. I thought about this list quite a bit. I spent like my entire plane ride on it that I wasn't playing video games and finishing Dragon Quest III. But yeah, I'd been thinking about this a lot, and there are a lot of new genres defined in the last 10 years. And I got a lot of those on here. Gone Home, Destiny, Dark Souls, Minecraft, PUBG. Yeah, so I think this is a pretty good list. If you think of anything, though, let me know. We can talk about that a little bit. All right. Let's get that out of here for the moment. And we will move on to my top 10 games of 2019. All right. Let's get a little closer to present day here. I realized we talked a bit about the Game Awards last time around, but I never really. I had a a thing where I was going to go over all the games I played over the last year and talk about which ones are my favorites. I played a lot of games last year, though. Like, a whole lot. I'm looking at the list here. And how many games did I play last year? 1, 2, 3. Played 32 games last year. That's a lot of games. So we can eliminate about a third of these. And we can go with a top 10 games that I played in the last year. And these aren't all going to be games that I streamed. However, I think most of them are. Most of these I've streamed at least in part. So let's start with one that's probably my game of the year. I think it's my game of the year. It is Sekiro. Shadows Die Twice. Fans are all here for it. You know how I feel about Sekiro. That game is amazing. And, slight spoiler alert, it's also going to appear on my Game of the Decade list as well. And the reason for that is I was thinking about this a lot, because I streamed both Bloodborne and Sekiro, and I was trying to think in my mind, really, when you break it down, which one of these games is better? And I picked Sekiro over Bloodborne because I think there was, in the Souls formula, there was a deep built-in flaw. And the flaw is the whole blocking mechanic. In the Souls series, blocking is either mandatory and boring, or futile and pointless. And therefore you just dodge instead. And Bloodborne took a look at that problem and decided, instead of trying to make blocking interesting or cool, we will eliminate blocking and replace it with gun. And that is technically a solution, but that's like a Captain Kirk Kobayashi Maru situation where you're reprogramming the game to cheat, or reprogramming the simulation to cheat. Sekiro went the other path. How do we make blocking exciting, an important part of the gameplay, make it look cool instead of just standing there with a shield up, getting smoked by a dragon, but also keep the dodging in? Because the dodging is graceful and elegant and cool and makes you feel cool. How do you make all of that also apply to blocking? Sekiro solved that problem. It didn't try to sidestep it like Bloodborne did. It actually solved it, and it was a wonderful game. Absolutely wonderful. I loved it. Yeah, what else I loved? Fire Emblem. 3 Houses. I was thinking about Fire Emblem a lot, because I was considering replaying it. I haven't replayed it yet. I've only done the Black Eagles Edelgard route. And the main thing that stops me from replaying it again is she's right. Edelgard was right. The Black Eagles team are essentially like, she's a fusion of Bernie Sanders and Khan from Star Trek, and you fuse them together and put the result through the anime filter, and you get Edelgard, who's one of the most interesting characters that's ever been in a Fire Emblem game. And just everybody in that game is just really cool. I love all the characters in that game. I like the maps in that game. I like the story in the game. I love the music in the game. It's just wonderful. And I'm not the only one who thinks that. I saw that at the Game Awards, the fan vote for what is the best game of the year was Fire Emblem won that, which was a little shocking to me. But honestly, it really shouldn't have been, because it's just great. The writing's fantastic. The voice acting's amazing. There's my only possible complaint with that game is that it's maybe a little on the easier side. But I think I'm generally okay with that. I think 3 Houses has gotten way more people into Fire Emblem than Awakening ever did, and that can only be good for the franchise in the future. Next up, Astral Chain. I was thinking about the 2 action games that I played this year, Astral Chain and DMC5. which I did not vote on here. And I chose Astral Chain as the game that I liked more. Because it's just something... Like, it's something new that hasn't been seen in character action before. And the setting, and the music, and the fact that it is a living anime that you play yourself with all the cool hyper action nonsense and that sort of thing. Like, everything about that game kind of comes together and just makes an overwhelming package that it blew me away constantly while I was playing it and streaming it. Except for, what was it, Chapter 8? The Breather episode chapter? That one wasn't the greatest. But you did get the Axe Legion, so I guess it's alright. It's the mini game chapter where we had to do the traffic jam puzzles and that sort of thing. I didn't like that part, but everything else was great. And, every game has something that isn't the greatest. Astral Chain had that as well. But overall, I would say that I liked it better than Devil May Cry 5. But it was close. DMC5 was great. It was really, really good. I just liked Astral Chain a bit better. Doesn't have to be, purely empirical all the time. Well, let's see, what's next? Here's one that I've streamed this one quite a few times as well. So I've streamed all of Sekiro. I streamed a little bit of Fire Emblem. Streamed all of Astral Chain. And I streamed some of this as well. Tetris 99. So we talked about, PUBG before and how it popularized and made the Battle Royale genre explode. And, there was a time when everybody was throwing a Battle Royale mode into everything, and that's part of PUBG's influence. And it gets to the point where sometimes you joke or you meme about things getting Battle Royale modes that really shouldn't have them. And in this case, that thing is Tetris. But you know what? The absolute madmen went and did it anyways. They turned Tetris into a Battle Royale game, and it was amazing. It was actually amazing. I love Tetris 99. I still go back and play it from time to time. I haven't gone back to like the real life Tetris Hellzone though. What do they call it? Tetris Invictus? I did that once, and once was enough. I don't think I need to do that anymore. But it's still a great game, and they keep adding stuff to it. There's some pretty cool skins and that sort of thing. They added a team mode recently as well, which I believe is another feature in Fortnite, at least, in terms of Battle Royale games. But there's like Team Tetris now that maybe I should check out at some point. Alright, what's next? Next is one that I did not stream, but I definitely talked about it a little bit. That is AI, the Somnium Files. So, I said in the last segment, if visual novels are a game, then Gone Home is a game. Well, AI, the Somnium Files, is a visual novel. It was written by Uchikochi, who is the guy who came up with the Zero Escape series, 999, Virtue's Last Reward, and a Zero Time Dilemma. Fortunately, I've never played Zero Time Dilemma. I've heard it's awful. I've read the story of it, and it looked really bad, so I didn't play it. But 999 is one of the best visual novels I ever played. It's an excellent thriller, that sort of thing. AI, the Somnium Files, I think is Uchikoshi's best work. I loved it. It's a fantastic story. It is... it makes sense. I was very satisfied when I finished it, that all the pieces were in place. The mystery makes sense. I understand what happened. But it's also a game where you have to play, Minecraft with an internet idol. Or at least you are threatened with the possibility of having to play Minecraft with her, and then she explains complex philosophy to you. It is also... It is also a game where your eyeball is a sentient computer and can walk around and fight people and that sort of thing. It is a wonderful game. It is a thriller, and it's very gory. I will tell you this up front. If you can't handle blood and descriptions of blood and unpleasant things in terms of bad things happening to your eyeballs, then you might not want to play this game. But if you can handle that stuff, I absolutely recommend it. It's a game where you play as a detective who is solving a serial murder case. That's where it starts anyways, and it just goes completely mental from there. And it's a wild ride. Absolutely loved it. Highly recommend. Available for everything. Oh yeah, no, it's great. I think it's on PC as well. I think it's on everything. Absolutely play this game, love it. Now, things that aren't on everything. I'm pretty sure this is one of the things that Tim Sweeney bought as a Epic Game Store exclusive on PC. But it is on the Switch as well. That's where I played it, and I streamed it for you after a very rough day at the DMV. Untitled Goose Game is pure joy in the form of a honking jagoff, and getting to be the honking jagoff and just ruin everybody else's lives without any of the real life consequences that have to do with ruining people's lives in such a way. Wow, that was such a cathartic game. I love the Untitled Goose Game. And speaking of memes, I don't think it's reached, it hasn't reached Undertale status in terms of number of memes created, and it probably never will. Untitled Goose Game, I'm afraid, is a game that's going to be forgotten. I think it's one of those games that's going to get lost to time. So I want to make sure that we give the Untitled Goose Game its due. It got a Muppet spin-off at the Game Awards, which was incidentally the best thing at the Game Awards. I hope they make that into an actual game. Muppet Goose Game. That'd be great. But I loved it. It feels like you're actually a goose. Like it controls like a goose. It has a dedicated honk button. It's great. Like the chaos you can cause in that game is very well choreographed. It is very funny all the time. I'm laughing just thinking about some of the stuff in Untitled Goose Game. I am so glad I played that game. It is well, if you play it, you'll know exactly how a goose controls, because it controls like that. It controls like a jaguar. Exactly. Exactly. Oh, that reminds me. Did I ever finish talking about my Christmas gifts? Did I get to the bit about the smoked cheddar? Because I was thinking about the smoked cheddar again right now, and how much I wish I still had it, but I had to eat it all there. Oh no. Alright, so this next one, I did not play this on stream. I was going to, but I wasted too much of my life on Death Stranding. And that is Luigi's Mansion 3. Luigi's Mansion 3 was, it was made, let me see who made it. It was not an internal Nintendo thing. Luigi's Mansion was made by, let me make sure that I credit this properly. It was made by Next Level Games. And it is, that's the company that does like Mario Strikers Charged, those two games. They also did Punch-Out Wii as well, which was pretty good. And they did both Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon and Luigi's Mansion 3, but also Metroid Prime Federation Force. So it was weird having two good games with one kind of lousy one in between. Luigi's Mansion 3 is the best in the series by far. It is constantly wonderful. I would like to... So there are two places over the break. I decided that there are two places that I would like to live. I want to live in the house from Knives Out. If you saw that movie, the Daniel Craig whodunit. Incredible movie, by the way. It's definitely the best movie I saw last year. And it's not close. I want to live in the house from Knives Out. And when I go on vacation, I want to go and stay in the hotel from Luigi's Mansion 3. That hotel is so cool. Like the different theme floors and everything like that. Yeah, I mean, there's this slight problem where you're constantly getting spooked by ghosts that are trying to stuff you into a painting. And that's a bit of an issue, if you're Luigi. But it's fine. He's a Ghostbuster. So the premise of Luigi's Mansion is it's Ghostbusters, but you play as Luigi and he's a coward. And it's just great. You stun Ghost with a giant flashlight that goes kind of like a camera flash, and then you suck him up in a vacuum cleaner. And the new thing in Luigi's Mansion 3 was Gooigi, where you make a clone of Luigi made out of goo, and you can control two characters at once, and do a bunch of things that regular Luigi can't do on his own. And I felt that they balanced the use of Luigi and Gooigi incredibly well. There was never a point where I felt like I was being force-fed Gooigi, which is kind of a really gross thing to think about. Now that I think about it, I don't even want to think about it anymore. Let's just delete that thought. Let's forget about the whole eating Gooigi thing. And never speak of it again. But Luigi's Mansion 3 it's incredible. So the way the game works is, you're in this hotel, and every floor has a different theme to it. So, like, there's an Egyptian tomb-themed floor, and there's a knockoff medieval times tournament restaurant type floor, and there's a museum floor, and there's a magic show floor, and everyone is just completely unique and original, and I was always excited to see what was going to be next. And it's one of those games that it was only about 15 hours long. 15, not 50. And I felt myself constantly wanting just a little bit more. It's like, wow, I can't wait to see what's next. And then I got to the end and I was like, oh, I wish there was a little more of this. So it was like exactly the right length. And oh man, I would 100% play Luigi's Mansion 3 if you've got a Switch and you haven't played it. It was phenomenal. All right, let's see what's next. Now here's a game that I played for a lot more than 15 hours. That is Etrian Odyssey Nexus. So that came out in February? I don't remember what month I beat it in, but it was a considerable number of months after it released. The whole Etrian Odyssey series, I love that series to death. It's one of my favorite game series. I think it's the best game series that came out on the DS. And I'm going to miss it. I think, like they said, that Etrian Odyssey Nexus, isn't going to be the last one, and they're going to reimagine it for the Switch. But the whole central conceit of Etrian Odyssey is that it's like an old school dungeon crawling RPG where you draw your own map on graph paper. In a time before games had maps and that sort of thing. And it used the DS's lower screen and the stylus, and you would draw your own map on it, and you'd make notes, and you'd show where shortcuts are and all that sort of thing. And it was a real tactile way that got you invested in the world. And on top of that, once you get invested in the world, then you get invested in the characters that you're creating. And by the end, you really are doing, like you're running your own D&D session, essentially. Where, you've made up all the characters, you've decided what their personalities are. My favorite was, I was playing Etrian Odyssey 4, like the second or third time. Because Etrian Odyssey 4 is excellent. I think 4 is probably the best in the series, but Nexus is very, very good. It's just, you can't play Nexus unless you've played other games in the series, because the whole point of Nexus is that it's a love letter to the entire series. And it takes familiar things that you know and remixes them in a brand new way that you don't know, that they're going to try to kick your ass with. Like in the very first dungeon, there's a boss on the first floor of the game, essentially. And then you go to the next one, and you're like, oh, I remember this boss. This is an Etrian Odyssey 4. But then, suddenly you're like, yeah, no, I'm going to go fight this boss. You're going down the floor, and then you get jumped from behind by a boss. And then you fight the boss for real later, and then you beat that boss, and there's another one, and it's the guy from the first game, and it's just, it was a blast. As a huge Etrian Odyssey nerd, Nexus was everything that I could ask for. Almost everything that I can ask for. I don't believe it let you rename the classes like you could in 5. So you couldn't have the Herbalist and have the Prestige class version of it be named Snoop Dogg. But that's neither here nor there. I loved Etrian Odyssey Nexus. I hope they find a way to keep the series going, but I don't know how they're going to do it without drawing the maps. I don't know. But, fortunately, it's not my job to deal with that. And I hope that whoever's job it is comes up with it. This next one was on a number of Game of the Year lists. I believe it won it in at least a couple major publications, and that is Control. Control has some severe technical issues if you try to play it on a console. However, it is an incredibly engrossing and engaging game. It's kind of based on a combination of federal bureaucracy, creepypastas, and House of Leaves. You know, the book House of Leaves by, let's see, Mark Danielewski. I always forget the last name. I keep thinking Lewinsky, but that's definitely not it. But the idea of Control is that there is this government organization called the Federal Bureau of Control that deals with weird stuff. In particular, they deal with objects that have gained power through some means, whether they have had such meaning ascribed to them by humans or what have you. These objects have become supernaturally powered in some way. And this is the Federal Bureau, kind of like the Men in Black, that is assigned to deal with such occurrences and keep them under control, that sort of thing. And it takes place in a government building called the Oldest House, where the walls shift and move, and the geometry is strange. And the geometry in there reminds me a lot of what they did with Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne, which is another one of my absolute favorite games. It's the best Pokemon game, Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne. And it is kind of a third-person Metroidvania type game that has like randomized power-up elements. That part I didn't like, the randomized power-up sort of thing. But this is made by the same crew, Remedy Games, that did Alan Wake and Quantum Break and that sort of thing. And rather, those games. And it is wonderful. Like, this one might get streamed in the future. It's one of those games like Prey was, that was largely overlooked, I think, in the media, but it is 100% worth your time, I think. Control was great, even with the technical issues, and some of them were like kind of game-breaking. Like, you dropped to 0 frames per second in the middle of a heavy firefight and that sort of thing when you use your psychic powers. Which you have a lot of telekinesis and that sort of stuff. But Control was great. I would love to play it again, and if I do, I will stream it. And that brings me to my last game in my top 10 games from 2019. Now, there are a couple notable exclusions. I'll tell you, the last game on my list is not the Resident Evil 2 remake, even though that game is excellent. I decided to exclude remakes, so Link's Awakening is not on there, and Resident Evil 2 Remake is not on there either. What is on there is Sayonara Wild Hearts. I like weird games, and Sayonara Wild Hearts is a weird game. It's a music game, but it's also a story. It's kind of like, what's the best way to describe it? Yeah, it's not Star Wars. I know. You thought I was going to say Star Wars, but it's not Star Wars. Now, part of that is that I haven't finished Star Wars. I don't think it's fair to put something in there that I did not finish. But the other thing with Star Wars is that it feels so similar to Sekiro in a lot of ways that it's kind of weird having them both on there when I think that Sekiro is just better than Star Wars. I think Sekiro is a better game than Star Wars. But Star Wars is very, very good. And it's weird to just have two of the same type of game on there. And this happened on my Game of the Decade list as well. There was a fight between Sekiro and Bloodborne, and whether or not I would put both of them on my list. And spoilers, I didn't. But Sayonara Wild Hearts was an experience. Like, I never uploaded it because it would get immediately claimed because it is a music game. It's like a concept album that you play. It's something else. I had never played anything like it. Apparently Rez is very similar to it, but I streamed that when it came, the night it came out, and it was an hour long. It was a wild ride. It was incredibly cool, and it had Queen Latifah, so you know it's good if you can get that level of star power on it. Yeah, Sayonara Wild Hearts, it's excellent. Man, I don't know that I'm ever going to play it again, but it will live in my brain forever. That is my top 10 games I played this year. I know that there are some definite disagreements on Star Wars not being on there. Yeah, I get that. I get that. Star Wars is great. And I know that there's also the whole, Resident Evil 2 remake is nothing like the original Resident Evil 2. Or rather, it is like the original Resident Evil 2, but it's also completely different, that sort of thing. I never played the original Resident Evil 2. I only played 1 and 4. But I picked up the RE2 remake, and that's another one that could be a good candidate for a stream later on. It's great. There's also the RE3 remake as well coming out as well. But other than those two, Star Wars and Resident Evil 2, I can't think of anything else that I feel really bad about not putting on the list. Yeah, Sayonara Wild Heart. It's another one of those games that it really just flew under the radar, and part of it is because its original release was on the Apple. What's the Apple gaming service called? It was one of the games on that, and then it came out for everything else a week later. Apple Arcade. It was an Apple Arcade game when that launched, and it just kind of got swallowed up by the fact that there were so many games on there, and then it was swallowed up because there were so many games when it actually came out as well. But I think it's definitely worth a look. Alright, so now we're going to get to super big controversy time. We're going to do top 10 games. Oops. Top 10 games, 2010 through 2019, in no particular order. No particular order. This was really hard. Like, it was incredibly hard. I had my initial list here when I started working on this was 25 games. 25. And it was just really, really hard to pare it down. Really hard. There's usually... And the part of the thing that hurt was that we've had a few years now, like since 2017, where we've just been constantly assailed by good games and great games. So it makes you forget kind of how good games were back in like the PlayStation or the PS3 Wii era, that sort of thing as well. They were just like goodness, there were so many good games over the last decade. But I sucked it up and I cut them and cut them and cut them and cut them until I got the list down to 10. And I'm looking at the list here, and I'm like, yeah, these are all really good. So let's start with the one that I already told you was on there. Sekiro. Shadows Die Twice. And the reason it's on there over Bloodborne is what I was talking about before, that it solved the whole issue of blocking being boring. And it also was a lot more fast-paced than anything else from the entire From Software catalog. I like games that are kind of fast-paced and frenetic and that sort of thing, and the movement in Sekiro was that. Like, you gotta be fast, you gotta be sharp, You have lots of movement options. You have lots of combat options. I still haven't replayed it using some of the other tools, but Sekiro was just like, it might seem like it's recency bias, but I went and played, all of these games. I streamed Dark Souls, I streamed Bloodborne, I streamed Sekiro. I've played all of this stuff, recently, just to make sure that this game was as good as I thought it was, and it is. Sekiro is wonderful. All right, next up, Super Mario Galaxy 2. Mario Galaxy 2? I think that's the best Mario game of the last decade. Odyssey was excellent. Galaxy 1 was excellent, though it did not appear in this decade. Super Mario Galaxy 2 came out in 2010, so it barely made the cut. But it's everything you could want in a Mario game. It took all the good parts of Galaxy 1 and of 3D Mario in general, but managed to combine it with all the good stuff of 2D Mario. There's a lot of shorter missions, clear defined goals, but there are also explorable levels and that sort of thing. It exemplifies everything that is good and cool about Mario games, and you get it all in one game with just a phenomenal soundtrack. And Mario Galaxy 2 is just, God, I want to stream Mario Galaxy 2 now. It's such a good game. Another game with two, this is the decade of twos. So we got Shadows Die twice. We've got Super Mario Galaxy 2. How about Mass Effect 2? The Mass Effect series is what got me to look at Western RPGs seriously. Like, the original Mass Effect is one of my all-time favorite games. It's like, it's Star Trek the RPG, that sort of thing. I love Mass Effect. But Mass Effect 2, like Mass Effect 1, it was great, but it was jank. Like, especially the Mako nonsense, that sort of thing. There's a lot of really rough edges in Mass Effect. Mass Effect 2 is unbelievable. Like, it grabs you from the word go at the very start of the game. I don't want to say what happens at the start of the game. You should play it yourself if you haven't. But that game, it does not mess around. It's there from the word go. One of the great things they do in that game is that they made sure that both the core storyline and the side stories for each of your crew members and that sort of thing were treated with the same gravity and weight and that sort of thing. And you want to see every story in it because they're all good. And the game is fun to play. They retooled the mechanics so that it works more like a cover shooter kind of deal. There's regenerating health and shield. The suicide mission at the end. I think that's what they call it. Where you go to be big damn heroes and save the galaxy and that sort of thing, even if it kills you. Like, Mass Effect 2 was amazing. It was really, really wonderful, and it was one of the few games where I felt like the DLC expansions and missions and characters were really worth it. Lair of the Shadow Broker, in particular, is probably the best piece of DLC that's ever been created. Just in general. Mass Effect 2 was excellent. It's top-notch. I think it holds up today as well. And if you haven't played the Mass Effect series, I would at least play Mass Effect 1 and 2. Or maybe just Mass Effect 2. It's the best, by far. Now, there was almost 2 more games on this list that also had a 2 in them. But I changed my mind on which one was better on this next one. I think Dishonored 1 was better than 2. And part of the reason is because of the way the powers were set up. But the whole idea of Dishonored is that you assassinate people. It's kind of like Hitman or Thief, that sort of thing. Except you have superpowers. And the entire world of Dunwall in Dishonored is just incredibly well realized, with the plague and the rats and all the dirt and grime and all that stuff. It's a fantastic world to get immersed in, and the gameplay is top notch. It all responds very well. The powers are so cool, like being able to just stop time for everybody else while you move around and do stuff. Being able to warp short distances, being able to see through walls, see where everybody is. Like, it is the ultimate stealth action game, I think. Dishonored 1. Dishonored 2 is very, very good, and it had some really memorable levels. But I prefer the first Dishonored. Like, this is one where I think you'd get a lot of disagreement. I think most people prefer Dishonored 2 to 1 because of stuff like the manor level, or the one where you have the time travel device, that sort of thing. But stuff like that, the time travel device, it's cool. It's a really great level, but it's kind of it's one level. And I don't think that one level, even though it's amazing, elevates the second game over the first. There's two levels. There's the manor one, the puzzle mansion, and the time travel one are probably the two things that everybody remembers from the second game. But the first game, I would say it had a greater variety in the kind of levels that you encounter and the kind of things that you have to do. So, for example, in the first game, there is a level where you have to go to a fancy party, like a masquerade ball, and first you have to get in. Then you have to figure out who the actual target is based on clues you find. It's a trio of sisters, I believe, and one of them is the target, and they're all wearing masks and kind of the same outfits and that sort of thing, and you need to figure out who the target is first. And you're doing all of this in plain sight in what was normally a stealth game. It's just a radically different way to be stealthy, by blending in at the party. It's like it's almost like they went James Bond for a moment there. Oh, part of the reason I was late today because I was watching part 2 of Doctor Who, Spyfall Part 2. I don't know how BBC America manages to get a 52-minute show up to an hour and a half, but they did it anyways. Really liked the 2-part premiere. Oh yeah, Hawk is absolutely correct. You get roped into a duel in that mission. Like pistols at 10 paces kind of stuff. Like, that is the Dishonored mission that sticks out in my mind the most. But I think overall the first game was better. I really do. And I know that is not the most popular opinion for Dishonored, but it is my opinion. Now, for another game that does have a 2 in it, and was released this decade, Portal 2. One of the reasons that I don't like Gone Home is because it was already proven that you can tell like a meaningful story with gameplay, with extremely good gameplay. And Portal 2 had that. Its gameplay was excellent. It expanded upon the first game in a way that was all positive, in my opinion. And the story it told was really quite tragic. It was a very, very funny game, but it was, a comedy about a tragedy, is how I would describe Portal 2. And it was excellent. It was just excellent. And it even added, a cooperative or competitive kind of mode to it as well, which is something that I didn't really expect or need from Portal, but I played it a little bit and it was really fun. So Portal 2, it was really just the complete package for me. It had everything that I wanted. And I think it was better than the first. It was also released this decade, so that helps too. So Portal 2. I believe that is the last game on my list that has a 2 in it. Oh no, there was almost another. So there were 2 that I was considering. The second one, One was Dishonored 2, but then I decided, when I look back on it, Dishonored 1 was better. And the other was Xenoblade 2. But even though I think I might like Xenoblade 2 a little better, I'm definitely a little more attached to the characters in that one. Like, no lie, I bought the Pyra and Mithra figures. I have them on my desk. But Xenoblade 1, I think, is the better game. I do. I think it's more approachable mechanically, but it also has a much better implementation of mechanics and story. So in Xenoblade, you have, it's a story of Shulk, and he's really mad. And he is going to kill every single machine that he can get his cool laser sword on. And his cool laser sword has a number of interesting powers. And they are fully dressed. Well, obviously you haven't played Xenoblade 1 if you think they're all fully dressed all the time. Let me tell you about Xenoblade 1 and not wearing clothes. It's a very powerful strategy. One of the strongest things you could do in that first game was the naked Dunban strategy, where you would just take off all his clothes and you would use his skill set. He has an entire skill tree dedicated to running around naked and kicking ass. And it is wonderful. And also Sharla. So there. So there's this whole thing where one of the things that helps you get more in tune with a game and its world is if the mechanics and the story are integrated with each other and they match up well. And things you see in cutscenes are also things that you can do in battle. So in Xenoblade 1, you have the Monado, and one of its main powers is that it lets Shulk see visions of the future. So you might see, for instance, a spider, a giant spider is going to attack you and murder your buddy. So you get this vision and you can say, oh, hey, no, don't stand there. A giant spider is about to come down and get you. And you might see that in a story. And every time Shulk gets a power in a cutscene, you then get that power for the upcoming fight. So, for example, you get the power to see the future. From then on, for the rest of the game, you will get visions of what's about to happen in the battle and a time limit of when that's going to happen in the battle. And you can take actions and have your other teammates take actions that will change what is going to be done or change the result of what's going to be done, because it'll show you what's going to happen to who and what the result will be. And you can change all of that stuff based on your actions. And then in another cutscene, Shulk gets the ability to become super speed, like he has in Smash Brothers, and just dodge all the attacks. Then you get the super speed ability for the rest of that fight, and you can dodge all the attacks. It's just it's fantastic. And the world they created for it is amazing and fascinating, and the soundtrack is one of the best of all time. I just loved the first Xenoblade and everything about it. Chad also points out, too, that Xenoblade 2 is part gacha game. So the thing about that, I am excited about the remaster for one. I'll probably play Xenoblade a fourth time when that comes out. So you bring up a good point about the gacha game thing for 2, but I think what a lot of people completely miss about Xenoblade 2 is that the entire game is it's a metaphor for the unsustainability of mobile gaming. So the world of Xenoblade 2, everybody in this entire world lives on the back of literal whales that are full of gacha crystals. And the whales are dying off, one by one, making it harder and harder for everybody else to live. And the supply of all the crystals and what you need to do to get them, and what kind of beings are born from the crystals is all controlled by a shady organization that messes with the numbers and all that sort of thing, so that average people get average generic life forms and that sort of thing. And the whole point of the game is that Rex, the main character, is going to see the god of the world to tell him that this isn't working and we need a better system. So, like, Xenoblade 2 has kind of the gacha game mechanics, but not the microtransactions. There are no microtransactions in that game. But it uses them essentially as a takedown of that entire system of gaming, which I thought was incredibly interesting and completely missed by 95% of the people who played it. So yeah, Xenoblade 2 is very, very good, but Xenoblade doesn't have that sort of meta commentary on gaming as a whole. And I think it's very, very good. It's also easier to understand. Can you get Fiora like you can Cosmos? Yes. Yeah, you can get Shulk as well. Shulk and Fiora and Elma from Xenoblade X were added, I believe, as free DLC later on. Cosmos was in the original game and was just very, very difficult to get. She's the only light element blade in the game other than Mithra. So it was getting Cosmos early was an advantage. I did not get Cosmos early. I didn't get her until close to the end of the game. But I did get all of the rare blades and do the quests and everything in that. I never played the expansion to Xenoblade 2 though. That whole thing is like it's like Titanic. Like, you know what's going to happen in the end. You kind of don't want to see characters you like get to that point. I don't know. But alright, I got distracted by Xenoblade 2 again. Yeah, that's a good game. Okay. What's next? Zelda. Breath of the Wild. Well, here's where we can save some time. I don't think there's anything I can say about Breath of the Wild that hasn't been said already. It's just wonderful, and I cannot wait for the sequel. I hope it comes out this year, and then we'll see Breath of the Wild sequel on the next decade's version of this stream. All right, what's next? I kind of went out of order on my list here. It was relatively in chronological order until it wasn't, and I started cutting things. All right, so we got Galaxy 2, Portal 2, Sekiro, Zelda, Dishonored, Mass Effect 2, Xenoblade. 3 more to go. Oh yeah, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Everything you need to know is right there. Smash Ultimate is the ultimate Smash game. The whole reveal of everyone is here, just all the characters from all the past games being in. 1,200 music tracks from all over the place. The DLC characters that they're getting. It really is like the ultimate game. It lives up to its title. Smash Ultimate it has Sans Undertale in it. Like, everyone is there. It's absurd. And from an industry perspective, getting all the licensing agreements done to get everybody into the game all at once, I can't imagine what that was like. Especially with like the Dragon Quest hero. Like, I mean, they put Cloud Strife in a game so he could fight Mario and Donkey Kong. Like, that's not possible. Now, they were only able to get 2 songs from FF7, because presumably Squeenix is a pain about that sort of thing. They did a lot better for Dragon Quest, though. I guess it's just Final Fantasy music that was the real issue. But, you know, you have Cloud fighting Terry effing Bogard, yes, that guy. Fighting a guy dressed up as Sans Undertale. Fighting... Oh, who would he fight that's hilarious? Solid Snake? You could have Sans, Terry Bogard, Solid Snake, and Cloud fight each other. Ice climbers. It's the sentences that you put together when you're describing things that can happen in Smash Ultimate, they just don't sound real. They don't sound even remotely real, but it's all true, as Harrison Ford once said. And it's wonderful. And it is the best Smash game. And Smash is one of the best series there is. And it should not be a shock to anybody that it is on my list of the top 10 best games of the decade. Which leads me to Yakuza 0. Not 0A, just 0. I didn't realize that I was going to love the Yakuza series as much as I do. 0 was the first one I played. It's another game that has a lot of memes. The series in general has a lot of memes because of all the ridiculous stuff that happens in it. But when I sat down to play Yakuza 0, I did not think... Yeah, that's rad. Exactly. I did not think that I was going to love this series as much as I do. And Yakuza 0 is why. Like, if I had started with Kiwami, I don't think I'd like the series as much as I did, because 0 did such a good job of introducing all the characters. You know, why you should care about them, what their motivations are, what their life is like. You know, their general sense of morals and scruples and that sort of thing. And it combines all of that with a heavily dramatic story full of twists and turns. It's all incredibly interesting. And it's a story about an empty lot. Like, Yakuza 0, it's miraculous. They make an empty lot that's about as big as my apartment. And they make just an incredibly compelling crime drama out of all of that, and it's... I can't do justice talking about the story of Yakuza 0 without spoiling it, so I won't. But I will talk about the gameplay of Yakuza 0, which is top-notch. It is a action game beat-em-up kind of thing, where the fighting is fast and fluid. It feels amazing. You can just absolutely destroy random enemies in the most painful, obviously fatal ways imaginable. But it's okay, none of them die, because Kazuma Kiryu is a good boy and would never kill anybody. And in this game, so is Majima. He would definitely never kill anybody, even though he stabs them right in the heart with knives sometimes, or umbrellas and that sort of thing. But the sheer amount of stuff that you can do in the game is what's... Like, it creates a living, breathing world where you can just do all the stuff that you would normally do. You know, you can eat, you can go shopping, you can go to karaoke. You could do whatever you want. You can even run your own, cabaret club. The minigame there, of which is... So the Cabaret Club Czar game that Majima has, it's unreal. It's good enough to be its own game. And just... When they made this game, they pulled out every stop imaginable. So it's, it is kind of the spiritual successor to Shenmue, except it's good. I never liked Shenmue. I'll be honest, I never liked Shenmue. I thought it was very boring. So here's an example of how crazy Yakuza gets. So like, okay, we're going to make Yakuza 0. Okay, we're going to have this Cabaret Club Czar game. We need a bunch of girls. Should we just make girls up? You know what? No, let's get out the Rolodex and call all of the adult video stars we know, and we will have them play all the recruitable girls for this whole thing. And it's not just going to be a mini game. It's going to have an entire dramatic story and arc all of its own. And it's just the amount of detail and everything that they put into every aspect of this game is really unprecedented. And it's beautiful, and it even has Nugget the chicken. And I can't recommend it enough. Yakuza 0, wonderful, wonderful game. Best in the series, by far. And it made me love the series. And that brings us to, number 10. Blessed Nugget, that's right. Brings me to the last one on my list. So, I like games that make me rethink my perception of what certain genres are like. And for a long time, when I thought of first-person shooters, it was all, oh, Call of Duty, blah, or that sort of thing. When I liked first-person shooters, they were things like, GoldenEye and Perfect Dark and that sort of thing. And the game that made me look at FPS games again and say, you know what? I should not be sleeping on this genre because they can make some really good games in it. Oops. That is Doom 2016. Doom 2016 changed the way that I think about first-person shooters. I thought they were all, Call of Duty clones, American military propaganda, just all the worst things in the world is what I thought about them. Before Doom 2016, the last time I had played a first-person shooter was, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, because a bunch of my friends at work were playing it, and I wanted to play with them, and I tried it out, and I hated it. I hated everything about it. And I basically swore off the entire genre until I started seeing the reviews for Doom 2016 say, it's kind of like a really violent Metroid Prime. And I think that's kind of exaggerating it just a little bit, but Doom 2016 is something else. Like, the level design is top-notch. The action is top-notch. It's a game about being as aggressive and violent as you possibly can. And one of the things that I like about it is that it's not like you aren't killing other humans. You're killing, demons from hell. So it's okay, and you should be incredibly violent towards them. That's one of the other things that I never like about first-person shooters is I don't like shooting other people. Like Hitler, sure. You got some Nazis for me? Yeah, no, that's fine. Like people that are clearly and obviously evil. What's more evil than demons from hell? Now, to be fair, generally speaking, in Doom 2016, the people that have been eaten or possessed by the demons deserved it. They were mining hell for hell energy. That's messed up. Can't do that. But tearing them apart with your fists or a chainsaw is hilarious. The BFG is in there as well. So when I was growing up, I was not allowed to play Doom, original Doom. I loved Doom 2016, and the first thing I did after I played it was I went and bought all the old Doom games and played those as well. And I was like, wow, I missed out. I really did miss out. And the great news about Doom 2016, the greatest news, is that Doom Eternal is a real game that's coming out in March. And I'm kind of thankful that it didn't come out in November when it was supposed to, because there are a lot of games that I wanted to play then. But I'm also kind of not happy about it because, there's a little thing called the Final Fantasy VII Remake coming out in March as well. And I don't know that I have enough time in my life to play and stream both of those. So I may have to pick one. Or I may just have to start streaming every day or something like that. I don't know if that's going to happen. Because I get tired during the weekdays and that sort of thing. But yeah, Doom 2016. It's amazing. It really is. And it's constantly on sale on Steam. So if you haven't played it, I would pick it up. I'd give it a shot. Even if you don't like first-person shooters, it could change your mind. Change my mind. And that is my personal top 10 games from the past decade. I think I got a nice... I don't like to be locked into just one or two genres to play. I like to play games from all over the place. Sometimes you'll have platformers, you'll have Western RPGs, you'll have Japanese RPGs, you'll have stealth games, you'll have puzzle games, you have all sorts of different kind of games. I play a lot of games, and keeping an open mind for genres and that sort of thing, it's good for me. It helps me enjoy things more when I don't just limit myself to one or two genres of games. So that's my list. Is there anything on there that you feel is an egregious exclusion? Have I missed anything really, really obvious that I just didn't think about while I was on that plane? I will hear objections or additions if you have any. And like I said, that list was what, 25 members long. Just this morning, I spent a lot of today, cutting it down between bouts of jet lag and that sort of thing. But yeah, I think that is a nice kind of roundup of everything that was really wonderful about the last decade of gaming, at least in my mind. Looking at it again, yeah, it's good. All right, well, it hasn't quite been 2 hours yet, but I did just get back from Pittsburgh yesterday, and I'm very tired. So the reason we're not playing Star Wars today, if you're just getting here now and you're like, "Where's Star Wars? Why are we doing a podcast instead?" The answer is because my hand-eye coordination right now at this very moment is extremely poor, and I don't think that I can do a Star Wars correctly and lightsaber battle people very well. My timing would be very poor at the moment. Yeah, I guess it is 2:10 a.m. on the East Coast, and I am still kind of on East Coast time, so I'm a little tired. I was going to bed between 2 and 3 every night while I was out there. I never really adjusted, but I never adjusted properly. Like I kept staying up till 3 because I was really tired then at 3 in the morning, and now I'm really tired now. I think that's jet lag. I think that's what that is. All right, so let's put Gaming in the Years back up. And when should we have our next stream? I think we should do it. You want to do midweek? I want to play Star Wars. Maybe Wednesday? What do you think about Wednesday? Wednesday. What is Wednesday? It's let's do Jan 8, 9 p.m. Pacific. Let's say yeah, I think that's a good time. And yeah, this is definitely something different. Normally I let the games do the talking more than me most of the time. But this time though, I could talk for 2 hours. It's possible. It can be done. And I had a lot of fun, just thinking about everything that I played over the last decade and everything that I've seen in the industry itself and everything I played this past year. A little bit of retrospection is it's good for you. Retrospection, introspection, all sorts of good spections. And I hope that you enjoyed hearing my thoughts on video games. I like talking about video games quite a lot, if you did not know. I could keep you going for hours and hours and hours. But I won't. I've taken up enough of your time for one evening. Thank you for joining me, especially if you stayed all the way to the end, and doubly so if you did not yell at your monitor at all to tell me that I'm wrong. If you would like to tell me that I'm wrong, however, well, I am going to post this to YouTube. And there's always the comment sections. I'm pretty sure that's what it's for. Anyways, it's been great talking to yins. Have a great night, and I will see you Wednesday, barring accidents. I would always say that it is possible for things to go wrong, but I don't think they will. I think we're going to get Star Wars on Wednesday. So I will see you then. Have a good night, everybody.